Dr. Stanley I. Wolf, and I'm a physician, and my rank was at the Chosin Reservoir was Lieutenant JG in the U.S. Navy Reserve. The Inchon invasion was September 15th, 1950, and we arrived on the 20th. And they had already secured Inchon, and the 1st and the 5th Marines were in the outskirts of Seoul, and our battalion, the 7th regiment, rather the 7th regiment, was the reserve. And my first experience was we landed at the Kimpo Peninsula, and they said dig a foxhole. And I don't like dirt, and I dig a little 6-inch thing, and all of a sudden I hear pow, 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 and I thought, oh my God, they're firing. So you get out and you dig deeper, and it turns out they were firing at a cow in the field, and all night long they were firing, and they missed him. And I thought, oh, I'm in trouble, I'm in big trouble. In any event, we got into Seoul, and all of a sudden I grew up. It was no longer fun and games. And we went across the Han River into Seoul, and it was like Dante's Inferno. The sky was lit up, and the ambulance jeeps coming back with wounded, and we're going into the city, and our 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines was thrown in to relieve the 5th Marines who had been there in the attack. And we worked through Seoul and moved on up about 20 miles to a town called Uijeongbu. And I was awarded a Bronze Star for attending to wounded under firing conditions, and there was plenty of firing. These were from the North Korean enemy, who were still resisting the South Koreans and the Americans going north. And at that time they had decided on another amphibious invasion, since the Inchon invasion had been so successful. So they brought us back to Inchon, and we got on board LSTs, and this group moved down then around Busan and up into the Sea of Japan to North Korea, to Wonsan. And our battalion was the first ashore, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, and they had had 10 days up and down, while they cleared the largest minefield in history. Was in the Sea of Japan at that time, and we went ashore, and the South Koreans troops had broken through and secured that area. So there was no had they had resistance, I don't know whether we would have made it, because there was the Wonsan was a beautiful harbor, but had these islands all around, and the enemy having control of that harbor would have been awfully hard to dislodge. But in any event, we went ashore unopposed, and they had us get on board trucks at that time and move up toward Hungnam in North Korea. And from there we started ascending the mountains. And the first combat in North Korea was a town called Sudong, and Sudong is south of the Chosin Reservoir. And that's our first contact with the Chinese. And the Chinese, they notified General MacArthur, who was in charge in Japan, that the Chinese were in the war. And they said, oh no, they're not in. They wouldn't dare come in against the Americans. Those are volunteers. And don't be afraid of them. They're just like, there's a General Almond, who apparently had quite a good military record during World War II. And he was the adjutant, or for General MacArthur, and he characterized the Chinese as laundrymen. Don't worry, you're not afraid of laundrymen. Well, they were very good fighters, and they had been fighting, the communist troops had been fighting the nationalist troops, and the Chinese communists had won and taken over and amalgamated all those troops. And in any event, we met them at Sudong, and it's interesting, there was a picture on the front page of the Washington Star newspaper of myself and several of my corpsmen dressing the wound of a Chinese soldier on the hood of a Jeep. And the narrative on the newspaper was a Washington medic in North Korea, and there was my picture, and my folks had it all enlarged and everything. You know. And in any event, we moved up from Sudong. That was our first contact with the Chinese, and the historical record is the Chinese were just testing us, and then they pulled back. And this was the 4th of November 1950, and the weather was still relatively warm.